Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and welcome to our second panel of IFA today, Leveling Up Fantasy One Set at a Time, all about LitRPG. And I'm super excited to host this panel today. We have some fantastic authors in the room. And so I guess to kind of start with, we'll do basic introductions. So we'll go Richard, then Jeff, then Shami, then Tao. That's just the order you're on my screen. And then we will step it up from there. So Richard, if you want to go first.
Hello, everyone. My name's Richard Sparks. I am the author of the New Rock series, the fourth one of which, the final one in the series, comes out later this year. And it's LitRPG adjacent, so while it maybe has one foot in the RPG world, the series is not set in a game like some others are. So, yeah, I've got something to do with this panel, and otherwise, if I don't have anything to do with it, I'll keep quiet.
Hey there, everybody. My author name is Jeffrey L. Kohanek. It's actually my real name. And I have 32 published novels so far, and I just finished writing my first lit RPG. So it has yet to come out. It'll come out this summer, and but it's set in the world of wizardoms, and I have like 21 books in that world. So there's some crossover stuff going on, but yeah, it's been fun so far.
My name is Shami Stovall, Shami like the car cloth, and I believe I have close to 30 books out at this point. I really like progression fantasy and LitRPG. I think that's where I'm most known for was my progression fantasy, the Frith Chronicles, which is like a Pokemon. That's how I kind of describe it to people. So I'm really excited to be on the LitRPG panel. Can't wait to chat about the genre.
And hi, I'm Tao Wong. I am a lit RPG and progression fantasy author. For the most part, I have 50 plus novels and numerous short stories and novellas and novelettes. And yeah, I'm best known within the RPG sphere for the System Apocalypse and generally for progression fantasy with the Thousand Lee series.
And I am David Trotter. I am probably known for picking up Andy's role as the Bandhammer. I try to help keep our fantasy channel fun, friendly, and warm. But that being said, today is all about talking about LitRPG. And I'm really glad that all of you kind of touched on the different aspects around LitRPG, kind of where it started. Progression fantasy kind of in.
Make, but I've realized I forgot
hold on just a second.
Pieces.
If we could mute if we are not on the panel, that'd be fantastic. So kind of back to that with the kind of the change over to LitRPG, progression fantasy is where it kind of started. So I don't feel like we can talk about LitRPG without starting off with progression fantasy, because that was kind of one of the first steps into that world. So kind of just like going around the room, what kind of was your first step, taste, run into progression fantasy and such? So I'll just kind of open it up.
As a writer or as a reader?
Let's go reader first, and then we'll jump into writing.
Oh, someone else go. I haven't read a lot of lit RPG, but I've played a lot of RPG games. So,
same here.
I would say the first step for me would actually be one of the first lit RPGs that I recall ever reading, and it's more game lit by our definitions these days. And that was Guardians of the Flame by Joel Rosenberg. Back then, and it was very much a portal fantasy. People playing a game get tossed into the world that they actually that the game is based upon, really, and they run around, trying to get back in the first book, and then have to deal with various hijinks and free the society from slavery kind of thing. By the time they get to book 5 or so.
Yeah.
So I have an amusing story, I guess. I became aware of LitRPG because of my husband, John Stovall. And we went to bed one night and we're just kind of lying there. And he's like, Shami, if you could be a dungeon, what kind of dungeon would you be? And I was like, well, what is this question? You know what I'm saying? Like, what? A dungeon? Is this like some sort of weird foreplay? Like, what's going on here? And it was like, no. Like if you could be a fire dungeon or like a dungeon that had lots of fairies, or like if you had some sort of magic power, what would you be? And I was like, man, this is like completely out of left field. But we've played Dungeons and Dragons and other things like that. So I was answering and we were talking about it, but I was like, what is this? And it's like, oh, I've been really into dungeon core books. And that's a subsection of LitRPG. I guess this is like the niche of the niche, right? And dungeon core books are where the main character gets like either reincarnated or turned into the core of a physical dungeon. And they're usually like a gemstone or something like inanimate. And they're at the heart of the dungeon, and they create the dungeon around them to attract adventurers, because the adventurers who die in the dungeon feed the dungeon core and get it more powerful. So most of the book is about designing rooms, designing traps, designing monsters. One of the dungeons that John told me about, or the Dungeon Core books, was the Divine Dungeon by Dakota Kraut. And he also really liked the Bone Dungeon, or the Elemental Dungeon. Sorry, I think Bone Dungeon is the first one. So he was telling me all about those. And so, yeah, I think that would be how I even became aware of the genre, was through a crazy niche of the genre. But it was really interesting talking to him about it. So then obviously later it went from there.
Awesome.
So I guess I'll go next. The very first series I ever wrote, the first book came out in 2016. And the whole idea was based on a magic system I came up with. And like a character, basically, what ended up happening is I wrote progression fantasy for the most part, pretty close to staying close to the current rules without having any idea what it was. And I don't know if it even was defined back then. I think that definition kind of came later. But yeah, so I mean, there are parts of it that kind of like speak to me like naturally, and I like that. But the lit RPG aspect, even though I'm a lifelong gamer and I love RPG games, I just wasn't finding anything that spoke to me like I want to write this story until like now. It took this long, like, and I think that's really important, is to make sure that you've got to be fully invested. You're not just writing because you think that it's going to pay the bills. You're writing because there's something inside you behind it that wants to tell that story.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, Jeff. And Rich, I saw you put your hands up. So,
well, I just completely agree with what you just said, Jeff. For me, it was the joy of galloping around one night playing a game with 23 other scoundrels in my earphones, getting up to mischief and thinking, what would it be like to be this guy, this heroic young battle mage with a magic staff, for real, not in a game. Well, there's only one way to find out, and that was to write it. And that was how the first book started, with our heroes winning a world championship in the real world, and then he's standing on a hillside with a crappy sword, and he's being chased by wolves. And of course, having been a hero in one world, he's completely hopeless in real life, as it is. I mean, he's not in a real world. There's no going back. There's a whole reason for it. But that's how it all started, with me thinking, wow, that looks fun, and plunge on in. And of course, it's wonderful to go back to the beginning, and our hero is a complete noob again, and he has to learn how to stand up and how to avoid wolves, and he gets captured and sold off into the army, where it becomes a training sequence, and then got to work his way up, which is the classic progression thing that this form of fiction gives us. Is that the progression steps are great in fiction when they work.
You bring up a really good point, and I am interested to hear all of your different viewpoints, or if you want to share. But so what is the difference between lit RPG and progression fantasy, or is it more of an evolution of a genre or a subset? I think it's an interesting topic, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'll go first this time. Quickly, it seems to me that the way into a fantasy is no longer a wardrobe. That was back in the 1950s. You go through a wardrobe into the new world, and now we go through our technology and our other lived experiences into our fantasies. And, I couldn't possibly have written my books 20 years ago because the world they came from didn't exist. So I'll hand that over to the next person.
Okay. So I guess from my perspective, progression fantasy, it's kind of like it can become it can be an element of lit RPG, but it doesn't have to be, right? So it's about leveling up and trying to get stronger, right? You're constantly like moving toward improving your character in some way. But it also doesn't have to be in lit RPG. That can happen in any fantasy story, right? But the lit RPG, you're in some sort of game world, or the game world, or the regular world has become a game, I guess. There's always some game element to it.
Yeah.
So I feel like the defining point of progression fantasy is that a main part of the story deals with powering up. So either we have to power up because we need to fight somebody, or we need to power up because we need to get a certain ability to do a certain thing. And that's what the plot revolves around. So while certain fantasies might have characters who can get stronger, Gandalf goes from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White and obviously has a power up. It's not like the central point of the story, right? Like that was a side thing that was cool, and it was awesome to see him do something fun. If the entire Lord of the Rings was about how Frodo needed to do 30 push-ups every single day so that he could power up to a certain level so that he could fight Sauron and punch him in the face with the ring, and you know what I'm saying, that then it would have been a progression fantasy because we would have been actively hoping that Frodo got enough power to fight this guy. Instead, Frodo just has to be, good of soul long enough to get that ring to Mount Doom and throw it in there. He doesn't really need to power up. He just has to stay the course. So that's how I would define it. That's the thing that drives people to read progression fantasy. A lot of the time, it's also kind of a fun, almost wish fulfillment in the sense that even if you are small and pathetic right now or not doing that well, if you work hard enough, you can become great and epic and amazing. And a lot of I think the best progression fantasy in the series starts with a main character who is broken or picked on, or people don't like him so much. I don't know if anybody here has read the Cradle series, like Unsold by Will White, but I think it's probably one of the biggest progression fantasies in the series. And obviously Lyndon starts, he doesn't have like a path. Everybody else already has a path, but he's unsold. He doesn't have anything. People make fun of him. He gets bullied. But obviously he becomes something more, and it's all because of hard work, like, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. So I think that's the core to progression fantasy. And the reason that LitRPG fits so well, or their Venn diagram crosses over, is because a lot of video game structure, a lot of system structure enumerates your power, and this encourages you to get more powerful, right? If I'm level 1, I'm kind of weak, but if I'm level 10, I'm much stronger. Gaining experience, having the numbers go up, or as everybody jokingly says, numbers go brr, because you just want to see them get higher and higher, is a lot of the fun, because we want the main character to be powerful enough to punch anybody in the face, Sauron or otherwise. And LitRPG just does it with numbers so that you can really quickly determine who's the strongest in the situation, or, we get to see how their powers work almost with math. And so I think it resonates a lot with people, especially anybody who's grown up with video games, because a lot of video games enumerate powers with numbers.
I think everyone's covered it, so I'm not going to go and repeat.
Oh man, we'd love to. You always feel free. So, well, then we're going to start with you on this next one. So I'm going to put you on the spot, then Tao. One of the things that kind of got my mind working into lit RPG was the Robin Williams movie Jumanji, right? Like I know that was technically a board game, and I know they did a remake with the video game, but I think that kind of idea of like being able to go and travel and do something new or different. So what was something that was not a book that has kind of inspired each of you in your world, in your journey? It could be a game, a movie, something like that, and why?
I mean, I've used, like Richard, I'm an old time tabletop role player, so I played a lot of World of Darkness back in the day, some D&D, but not as much Shadowrun. So the World of Darkness and Shadowrun were both like huge aspects of my tabletop times. I also spent a lot of time playing board games for a very long time. So I think both of those things really have had major influences. Video games wise, I kind of stopped playing major video games around the early 2000s, just because time ran out on me and tendonitis started killing my hands. So a lot of the older games, like the old D&D based Baldur's Gate games, Lords of Waterdeep, areas like that were a huge influence, along with Diablo. Like the System Apocalypse basic skill tree system comes from Diablo, right? And the ideas of multiple tiers that you can go up. I can't even remember which video game I pulled it from, but yeah. So those are all, major influences as I play along. Magic Kingdom at War is basically Civ and Heroes of Might and Magic reskinned.
I spent way too many hours playing Civilization 2.
Yeah.
They dumped.
That was the best one, wasn't it?
I dumped way too many hours. Anybody else? Jeff, Richard, Sam?
My husband and I made our own tabletop game. So like Dungeons and Dragons, like we designed a game together. And I would definitely say that helped me. Like my entire LitRPG series that I wrote is based off of that. Like I use that system as a part of the system in the universe. So yeah, I feel like, I guess with everybody else, I don't know if I would say I'm like crazy old, but I'm old enough. I've got one foot in the grave, right? But I've played tabletop games enough to be like, yeah, the numbers are cool, and I could see how the numbers are used because we're using them all the time, or even with dice or variables, or other things like that, or powers that have static effects. So, and when I was a DM, I thought about a lot story construction. How the players are going to go through an interesting story, what makes villains compelling, right? So, definitely tabletop gaming is what I'd say got me into it.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will say I have tabletop gaming experience, D&D mostly, but far, far more experience with like online RPGs, MMO RPGs, that kind of thing. And there's a lot like you go to read LitRPG book. To me, it seems like the good ones kind of take the best of both of those worlds and figure out how to tell a story that gives you that feeling of I went into this game, whether it's a game that some DM made up or some programmers, and then the characters have to figure out how to get through it and level up and all that fun stuff. Like I just think it's super cool.
Well, that's you jumped in. That's exactly the point of this. It's the best of both worlds. Games, and why games? Why do they work? Because they're the best of everything that we've done in our culture, going back to Gilgamesh. They plunge. I mean, how many games have you played with Norse mythology in them, and Indian, for example, going back to the Vedas? This has been rattling around in our consciousness for thousands of years, and games suddenly reinvented the wheel, brought it to life. And like I come from a script writing background, television mainly, and in that world, you're. What was I going to say? I've completely forgotten. But yes, in that world, you're often just using what's been there out in the culture and bringing it back to life and rediscovering old myths. And they echo down the ages to us, and to get to a whole new form where you can go into the story itself and not be the watching someone on screen doing it for you, but you're your own protagonist in your story. Well, and for me, it was a very short step to writing my own story from that. But aren't they wonderful to play when you create your own character and you're the lead? You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want. And the developers that have created these amazing environments for us to explore. And for me, fiction is very much about exploring, especially adventure fiction. fantasy fiction. Less so literary fiction, because quite often they're stuck in a suburb for the entire book. But that's real life for you.
Yeah. So everybody knows our word for our panel. So for the IFA secret word is loot, and it ties in really well to where we're about to hop into. So we kind of talked about like the overarching themes of kind of like where we kind of start, like what is lit RPG, what is progression fantasy. A lot of people have questions about that. For us who play in that world, we feel like it's very obvious, right? We're like, oh yeah, so there's a clear distinction between, you know, a standard progression versus lit RPG because of the numbers. Duh. Well, not everybody knows that, right? But one of the things I love most about lit RPGs are the strange power ups, the magical sword that does kajillion d7 damage, right? Or this overbloated spell. Like how do you write in an item that is extremely powerful, but set limits and bounds around it, so that way you don't just break your own story? And it could be an item, a spell, some kind of loot, or something like that.
We never promise the Earth. You never say this is the ultimate weapon. This is the Manhattan Project. This is something. Quite often, it's best if you don't really know what this thing is. In my books, you know, the object reacts, but why? Why is this a mystery object? Why is it a magical object? What have you got to do with it? No, don't give yourself too much power, because as we all know, heroes have to be less powerful than what they're up against. They get a little bit of help from their artifacts, and they're able to solve problems with them, but they can't be all powerful by any means.
Yeah, I will say I love enchanted objects or magical weapons, that kind of thing. I've been writing them in my stories for a long time. And I see them, it's kind of like if you create a magic system or something, you need to make sure that you understand what it can do and what it can't do. And usually there are, you know, like in most magic systems, there's some cost to executing a spell. You know, like a lot of these items, you might assign a cost to it as well. So that way the character who uses it, yes, they gain power from it, but it comes with that cost, right? It balances out. So yeah, I love in those kind of things. They're awesome.
I usually just bring them into the story in a major way. I mean, if we are going to have the sword that defeats everybody, it's the MacGuffin that we're looking for, right? Like the villain is too powerful. We need to get the sword that defeats everything, and then that's the main part of the quest. And or if the main character is going to have a super cool sword, the enemies also have super cool swords. The name of the game usually for me in progression fantasy, and what I like to see, is ever escalating fights, you know, the novel. So if we are going to have, again, crazy cool weapons, crazy cool armor, everybody's going to have crazy cool something so that we can have a really awesome fight. While it is sometimes amusing to watch a main character who gets so strong they can just beat anybody One Punch Man style, it's not amusing for very long. You still want him to have challenges, so there's always the next young master that he's got to defeat, right? In terms of like weapons that I've used in my books, I had in the Frith Chronicles, the main character forges a sword that cuts through magic as though it's not even there, you know, lightsaber style. And while that is very, very powerful, that's not the end of the world powerful, right? It's the rule of cool. I guess that's how I usually approach a lot of this. It's the rule of cool. If it sounds like it's cool and we can use it in cool ways, I think a lot of people will be having fun with it. Like, so that's what I do.
I mean, on a mechanical level, when I'm looking at adding something, it's within the boundaries of what the system has set, and I generally have overarching principles of what or how the system works. And like Jeff, most of my systems have a cost. You know, there's always a cost to the magic. There's a cost to what you're using. If it's a super powerful weapon that you're adding in, one of the easiest ways of limiting it is giving it a total number of users, right? So you can use this grenade of Antioch once. And now you've got to go and decide when you're going to use it, right? And so that adds, tension to the story and makes it interesting. Whereas if it's just something that you can just spam forever, unless you're going for a humorous thing, like, One Punch Man, it does lose its charm after a while. Or you could do what Eric Uglin did within The Good Guys, where he gets an amazing sword and then he loses it within, I think, the first few chapters. And then he never goes back to look for it, ever.
Yeah, so I do love it because you can't subvert the expectation, right? But let's take this kind of question. You kind of already hit on this a little bit, and let's talk about like fight progression, leveling up, and how do you keep it engaging whenever you start your characters normally pretty low level, pretty low skill, and raise the stakes without it feeling old, tired, or like keeping it exciting. Because like for example, like when you're fighting that first person, it's either it's like a slum goblin or a wolf out in the woods. And then you see like a god flying through the air and purple lightning shooting out of their eyes. It's like, how do you build that tension without making it seem irrelevant at the beginning but scale upwards?
I've got an answer. Shall I go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's the law of diminishing returns. If you keep having battle after battle after battle, it's going to get old pretty quickly. So what you have to do is break it up. And what Hitchcock would do, he would frighten you and then make you laugh. And that both gives you a relief and also suckers you into a sense of security, and then he terrifies you again. And that those two threads weave together. So in and out of the battles, and for example, if you would go back to Lord of the Rings, it was mentioned earlier, it isn't continual battle after battle. Other things happen along the way. I use humor because I come from a script writing comedy background, and so there are, intervals in during the adventures in which funny things happen because comedy and adventures are very similar, and they're all about things going wrong and trying to figure out the way through them. So I would say the law of diminishing returns is one to be aware of when you're creating a story. Is if you have too many battles, you're going to lose the impact of them. Next.
Yeah, so much like you, Richard, I use a lot of comedy. I love comedy. So I have, and part of comedy is I like group camaraderie, right? So there's banter and
Yeah.
these people, they know each other, they deal with each other all the time. So, there's this one has this quirk and that one's annoyed by that quirk and that kind of thing.
And they
Yeah.
can rag
So,
on each other and all
yeah.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that I love that because it gives you another dimension in the story versus just, fighting bad guys or whatever
And
it
it
is.
makes them more people, doesn't it?
Oh
It
yeah,
makes the
absolutely.
characters much rounder.
And I would say most of the time through each book, if you're going to have numerous battles, like you're ramping up. Like the highest stakes one is at the end of that novel. Then you go to the next novel and you're kind of starting over, but you're not starting over from ground one. You're starting over from like level 5. Let's say the first novel you went from 1 to 10. Well, now I'm starting at 5 and I'm ramping up and I got to go to 15 by the end. That's kind of how it goes.
So I kind of thought what you were asking was how do you make the first fights seem interesting when we also have gods in this world? Like, how do we keep everything interesting in an ever escalating fight situation? I guess I agree with Jeff and Richard generally that you just don't want to have nothing but fights because they get really, really boring. But the key to a good fight is the stakes, right? So any fight can be interesting as long as the stakes are there. If his first fight is against a wacky little goblin, if the stakes are he's going to die unless he beats the goblin, I'm pretty invested in what's going on, right? Even if it's a stupid
Yeah.
goblin, because I'm like, oh, I don't want the main character to die. Or if he's protecting his significant other, or his little sister, or something like that, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm invested. And that's with every fight. If there's not any reason for me to be tense, or if there's no consequence for failing, then who cares what he's fighting? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? He could be fighting the most powerful lightning god of them all. It shoots 30 lightning bolts out of their eyeballs. But if there's no consequence for failing, or if it's obvious it's just going to win, and there's what's the point of this? So making anything interesting from the tiny wolf all the way up to fighting God himself is just all about stakes. What are we trying to accomplish here? I guess one of the things about LitRPG or progression fantasy in general, really, is that usually the fights, we get powers that make it interesting and clever. So maybe we'll fight a wolf and we'll get the ability to, maybe you can use lightning, but then later, maybe you have a power that when you use lightning, it now becomes chain lightning, right? Like it can hit multiple people. So we might have a different fight where he's not fighting one wolf, he's fighting 30 wolves. And so it's cool to see his power escalate with him. Like, remember back in chapter 1 when he was fighting that one wolf and it was a struggle? But now he's fighting a whole horde of wolves, and his power is so powerful that he can take them all at once. And so you get that satisfying progression, which is, usually what people are there for when they're reading this sort of story. So yeah, I feel like the key to all fights is just make sure that you have interesting stakes.
Well, I also, sorry, go ahead, Tao.
I don't want to be after Shami anymore. She gives my answers.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I would say that staying alive is very, the great stake every time that they've just got to survive.
No, but that stakes are very much the things. It doesn't necessarily just have to be the stakes for the main character. You can also have stakes for the consequences for people. Like he can have the main character holding the door, right? For example. And if he fails or if he takes a step back, everyone behind him dies. Right. So those are types of stakes that you can generate that are outside of the main character itself. But if your readers don't care about either the main character, the main point of the fight or the novel, then it doesn't matter whether it's book 1 or book 12, they're gone. Right.
Yeah.
Ways to make fights interesting. That's pacing. Like, every fight doesn't have to be 5 chapters long. It can be one line. Those can really change up things. I like occasionally introducing a character again with him just, blasting through a bunch of minions in like a line. And it's just like, okay, now we've established how tough he is. Then the next fight, if he loses or gets his ass kicked by someone else who's much more powerful, you've now established stakes as well. And it's a change in pacing. You can also use a change in terrain, right? Especially with LitRPG, if people have debuff or trapping skills or things like that, you can make the fights really different because they're doing things like changing the environment. And a lot of fights in just general fantasy novels or sci-fi novels, they don't take into the environment as much. So it's the difference between watching a UFC fight and a Jackie Chan fight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just so you know, Jeff, keep your dog away from Melissa and her group. Totally welcome in our panel. Melissa and her group, they had a whole nother things to say about dogs, and we're very pro dog.
That's funny. Yeah, he busted in to my den, and I'm like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah. So speaking about having progression and characters and cool powers. Now this one is for each of you individually. What is your favorite power and or weapon you created and why?
Ooh. Great question. Favorite, go ahead.
My series, the Frith Chronicles, the first book is called Nightmare Arcanus, and the main character bonds with the Nightmare, and Nightmare is spelled with a K, like it's a knight. And it's a suit of armor that he can merge with. And I guess if that is a power and or item that I've invented, that I would say that it's like a suit of armor. So in my universe, if a sole ruler is assassinated or killed via surprise, really. A nightmare is born from their corpse. And so the main character gets his nightmare, and he's like a unironically good guy who basically goes on a quest of revenge with this nightmare suit of armor. I said that it was made out of it's made of revenge and shadows and nightmares, or like actual nightmares, not with a K, with an N. So, at the time I was like, oh, this is really fun. He can move through the shadows. His armor is black. It can merge with them. It has its own personality. It talks, like all this kind of stuff. I guess in progression fantasy, having sort of darkness powers is not very unique. A lot of people use darkness powers somewhere, probably because we're all edgelords secretly, you know what I'm saying? But I really loved it. Mine was more, again, like heroic and knightly because the main character is so very good. But yeah, I guess that would be my favorite. I really, really like the Nightmare.
Mine was a semi-meta commentary. So in the system apocalypse, a lit RPG system comes into Earth and takes over everything, and people can get classes, and you get classes in a whole variety of things, everything from plumber to an Eritrean honor guard, which is what the hero gets. But along the way, John runs into someone during a fight who gives him a buff called plot armor. And it's from basically a novelist who one of his skills is giving people buffs. That it was a kind of meta joke going on, but it fit into the universe. And one of these days, I'm going to have to write a short story about that guy.
Oh, listen. That's and again, I know Jeff and Rich, I want to give you your chance as well, but that's one of my favorite things about LitRPG, and like we're allowed to break the fourth wall, I think, so much more smoothly than other genres. It's almost expected, right? And again, Jeff, I know you're next, but like that's one of my favorite things. I love getting to throw out like an obvious, like, this is I'm not just breaking, I'm Kool-Aid man through that fourth wall right now. So, but Jeff, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem. So like honestly, I've got so many different powers and weapons that I really like over the years. I don't know if I could pick one, but so I'm going to pick one actually from my Lit RPG book, right, which isn't out yet. But book one is called Spellcaster Ted, and basically Ted is in a world of wizards and sorcerers. He's a spellcaster, quote unquote, other. He didn't even know what it was going to be. Anyway, so he's a misfit trying to figure that out. But he's in there with friends, and one of the friends created the character he created as a dwarf who has a sentient hammer. And so the hammer is what I'm talking about.
You're
so
a hammer guy, Jeff. You like
the
hammers.
hammer and the dwarf argue all the time, and the hammer's possessive of the dwarf. But one of the cool things about the hammer is the hammer can level up. So the hammer gains new abilities for every third level that the dwarf gains. So that's been fun. Like I only wrote one book with it so far, but yeah, it's been fun. And like having I love the comedic scenes with the dwarf and the hammer fighting with each other, and everybody else who can't hear the hammer thinking the dwarf is insane. And yeah, it's fun. It's good times.
Nice. Love it.
That's a very easy segue you've given me there. I'm going to give all credit to my editor, Leslie Robin, who many of you will know from the fantasy and SF world. She's extraordinarily talented, and I've been lucky enough to have her as the editor on my new Rock series. And in the book, our hero eventually discovers that, yes, there is magic in this world, and he creates his own magic stuff. And she fell in love with this character and said, this is a really unique thing you've got there. You've got a relationship between an inanimate object and the person who's created it, who's becoming a mage. I want more of this. Quite often you get editors saying, I want less of this, there's too much writing, or you've done that already. A lot of editing is to do with trimming and tightening. And she said, more. I want more of this character. I want to find more about her. I love it when she talks. So that was just a real green light to dive in there and create. And her name is Shift, it turns out, because she's not a grand person at all. She's very practical. And Shift is a piece of wood with a tourmaline heartstone in it. And there's the tourmaline. That is actually a genuine tourmaline that I bought and had made with a prop
cool.
maker. A prop maker here in Hollywood made this piece of I don't know, resin or something. And just many, many thanks to Leslie for getting me to explore this relationship between, as you say, between your hammer and your dwarf, between my mage and his magic staff. They grow together, they lose each other. Obviously there is breakage involved, and moving on and up. But that's definitely a magic artifact that I would throw into this to answer your question.
Yeah. Well, we have about 20 minutes, and I want to make sure we get through everything, which this has moved way quicker than I thought it was going to. So thank y'all for keeping it light and entertaining. One of the things I definitely want to talk about, and I think all across the board, audiobooks are becoming more and more of a thing. I think they're becoming far more searching, but especially in like progression and LitRPG, we are seeing just the rise of audiobooks. Kind of like, what are your thoughts? Like, what was your journey of finding your narrator, or how did you go about getting your audiobooks put out and into the?
I'm ready if anyone wants me to start.
Yeah, Richard, how'd you find your narrator?
It's me. I'm out here. I live in Los Angeles. There are lots and lots of. The English. The lead character in my book is an English person. The other two lead characters, one's Asian American from Los Angeles, California, and the third is an Australian whose avatar is an orc. Anyway, that's about that. So I was out here and saying to my producer, who is Fred Sanders, who did the Game of Thrones audiobooks, I said, look, who should we get to do it? And he said, you should do it. And I said, okay, why? And he said, well, people want to hear what the author sounds like, how the author says the words. The author tells the story. You don't have to be a great actor like those we've heard reading other people's books. I can name several authors who've done actors who've done fantastic audiobooks. He says they just want the author's voice. So I was encouraged by that, and Fred just wound me up and set me off in the studio, and it was a great experience. I'm about to do the fourth book later this summer, and that was really an eye-opening experience for me. And I love audiobooks, especially as you get older and your eyes get weaker. I go for a walk every day and listen to an audiobook for an hour, and it's not always fantasy fiction. It changes. Yesterday I was listening to the 1963 production of Under Milk Wood, narrated by Richard Burton, with a lot of amazing Welsh actors in it. And I was just laughing for an hour. I'd forgotten how funny it is as well as brilliant. So audiobooks for me are definitely my literary life these days.
I will say nobody was going to ask me to narrate my books. I'll just throw that out there. I do not have your.
I was just about to make that exact same joke, man. Nobody wants to hear me narrate nothing. Okay, you guys hear my voice?
Maybe having a pretentious English accent possibly helps. But Fred was really helpful, and he's done a lot of audiobooks himself as an actor. And he was telling me about his troubles with Roy Dotrice doing the last, not troubles, but Roy was pretty old when he was doing Dance with Dragons. Tyrion's accent keeps going from Welsh to Scottish to Zimbabwean as far as Fred can tell. So he's always trying to. He doesn't sound like that in this book. And Roy would totter off and do his next bit of reading. But so it's good to have a really experienced producer helping you. And of course, without the encouragement, I wouldn't have dared do it. I wouldn't have put myself forward. But a beta reader of mine who lives out here in LA is a producer. I use him as my reader, one of my readers. And I said, who should we get to do this? And he said, you. I hear your voice when I read the book. And actually, if you think about it, an author's voice on the page is unique.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of
that is a true point. That is a true point. And having listened to your first book, Rich, I think you did a fantastic job. Just so you know, I think you did fantastic. But I think Shami had a question or a statement, and then I'll pass it over to Jeff. Sorry.
First off, I was just going to make the joke that nobody wants me to narrate anything, and
it's the way you tell them.
Well, I do think. Well, at least I subscribe to the philosophy of if other people are experts in their field, I'm just going to let them handle it. And I do feel like some people are audiophiles, or they get a lot out of the audio experience. I don't listen to audiobooks, so I feel like I'm just in all categories the worst option to narrate anything. I don't really understand how to mix sound or record really well. Like I could record my voice, but I don't know how to change it. I don't have a cool producer like Richard does, things like that. I just if I did it myself, I feel like I would flail around, rolling in a ditch. Basically, that would be the audiobook equivalent of what I've produced. So I think I went more the traditional route with most authors. When I first started out, I took auditions and then listened to some people and picked somebody based who I thought was doing a really good job. And then later I was in contact with audiobook production companies like Tantor and Podium and stuff like that. And they handle the audiobooks for me because they're professionals. And I feel like they can do a really good job and I don't have to be involved because I don't know what I'm doing. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna be probably recording my own books. Yeah, I've seen other people do it. I have my friend Robert Crane is doing it for his books right now. But if that works for you, that works for you. Like for me, I've gone with Podium on a couple series. My hijinks books are being done by Tantor right now. Um, I went with a narrator for I paid Travis Baldry for for like 12 of my Wizardums books. And he was great. And by the way, the reason I probably wouldn't do my own stuff because I did a panel with him one time and he was demonstrating how he changes his face and puffs his cheeks out and does these different stuff to make different voices and different sounds. I'm like, dude, like that's next level. I'm no wonder you're so popular now. But yeah, so I have one other series. My Tour the Dungeon Crawler series is done by Sambu Theater, and I like what they did, and I think that they're really good for LitRPG. So I'm going with them too for my Spellcaster TED series. So I just signed a contract with them, so they're doing those. And by the way, Sambu does Crawler Carl. If you don't
We
know.
almost made it. We almost made it through the LitRP panel without saying Dungeon Crawler Carl. We were so close. We were so close.
Yeah, and then I stumbled all over it.
Handled my urban fantasy, and I 100% recommend them as a company. If you're an author and you're looking for like the best, I feel like Sound Booth Theater is some of the best out there, especially in this genre. Now they are very, very busy, so you might be like, oh, but when you're an author and you're first starting out, it's good to keep in mind all of the different options that you could try. And you shouldn't ever be intimidated in not trying. I feel like if you never ask the question, obviously you'll never get where you need to go. But you should ask. You know what I'm saying? If you've got a LitRPG and you think that Sound with Theater would be a great fit, they have a submissions email, I think, just on their on their website.
Yeah.
There's ways to get a hold of them. You should definitely try.
I think the guys at Aethon that's a good fit for LitRPG as well.
Aethon,
for a broader publishing.
There's a lot of different publishers these days in the place there. You just have to be careful about the contracts that you come through. As we found out recently in the big Shadow Light Press debacle. But audiobook production, there's a lot of great companies like Dreamscape, Podium, Audible sometimes if you're lucky, Tantor. So you can talk to them, and it's individual smaller companies that also do it as well. For me, I've worked with most of those companies already, and I still generally prefer to do it myself. One of the easiest ways that I've found for finding good audiobook narrators is just listening to see or looking at who's doing all the narration in the RPG or in your genres and see who's doing really well. Look at their reviews, right? Audible's hidden it now, but it used to be, and you can still find it. Then star quality value for narrators and how readers and listeners who are listening to these narrators feel about the work. So even if the book itself might not be the best, they might still narrate the narrator very highly. And so you can always look all of those things up to find your narrators. And then you just contact them. Most of them are the very popular narrators are generally a few years booked out. Like Travis is booked out until God knows who not when right now. But that's how I found Travis early on. That's how I found Nick Podell, who did the System Apocalypse. I've worked with Eric Martin for Adventures Abroad, Neil Halligas for Magic Kingdom. You just go out. Andrea Prasno is generally available within 6 months, I think. And she's amazing on The Wandering Inn, if you ever listen to that. Yeah.
Awesome. So, as this is going to be the final question that we're going to have for this panel, and then I'm going to let you all go around and kind of do your about you, where they can find you and all that good stuff. But I am really interested. We've talked about like the journey, right, across the world. And as we kind of go here to the end, what's next? What's coming next for the lit RPG genre, progression fantasy? What do we think? What do we think we're going to pull from? What's the next step in the journey? Not the first step, sorry, Tao, but the next.
I'm gonna say romance. I'm waiting for romance and lit RPG to kind of join together at some point. Shami's sitting there shaking her head, going no. But I want
a level one kiss. That's a level one kiss. So you gotta pump them numbers up.
Yeah, no, dude. I keep hearing people say this, but have you seen the romance lit RPGs? They don't do well at all. Like,
I wrote one. I know it doesn't do well. Yeah, Leveled Up Love. I wrote that like 5 years ago. Way too early.
And it's gangbusters. Everybody loves it.
The people who read it love it. It doesn't sell, but the people who read it.
That's what I'm saying, man. I've been on these lit RPG panels. This question comes up, and inevitably somebody says romance every single time. I don't understand why people keep saying that. You know what I'm saying? Because lit RPG is when I said progression fantasy, and the point of it was getting more powerful and leveling up and ever escalating fights. Like that is in fact what a lot of the reader base is here for. And romance is about interpersonal conflict and drama about whether or not characters will be together, whether or not this is all going to work out. I think the closest you could kind of even get is like Fourth Wing, where you're kind of mixing in these things because not to spoil everything, but it's about bonding with dragons, and the main character gets 2 dragons, and she's, more powerful than these other people because she's got these powers. But the thing about even Fourth Wing or a lot of these romanticises is that it isn't about whether or not she's going to be strong enough to beat everybody. It's about whether or not she's going to hook up with people. And I'm not even saying that's bad. I'm just saying that when you have conflicting goals in the narrative like that, it makes it too jumbled, where it's not a satisfying read for the people who are there for the fights. And it's not a satisfying read for the people who are there to watch everybody make out. You know what I'm saying? Like,
we got to level up from Dane to Zayden. We get it.
Yeah. So I just feel like if you're gonna do romance, you should focus on the romance, and if you're gonna do lit RPG, you should focus on the lit RPG and the progression and the leveling up. Lots of lit RPGs have romantic subplots. It's not like you can't have a romantic subplot, but when you label something as romance, that's the main plot. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the main thing we're going for. And I just feel like if you conflict the main purpose of your writing, you're going to somehow lose all the audiences. You know what I'm saying? You're going to satisfy nobody.
I'm going to throw cozy fantasy, which has a lot of romance in there, as a conflict point there. We're already seeing that, right? To some extent, where cozy fantasy, where there is no fights, generally speaking, and there isn't any huge leveling up, or not necessarily, with often romance in there already. So I don't think it's necessarily in complete opposition. But you are right. think it'd be nice to see it happen. I don't know if it ever will, but I think it will at some point because it
let me just state it in a really concise manner. I feel like fighting is an external conflict that is between two great giants that fight. And romance is an internal conflict, which is about, whether or not we're going to fall in love or if this is true and all this other kind of stuff. And focusing on both at the same time jumbles them. Whereas most stories, I feel that do them correctly, focus on one and then have the other as a minor point, if that makes any sense. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Wow. I wish I'd. Sorry, do you want to go on, Tao? Tao, do you want
go
to
ahead.
go on?
Go ahead.
I wish I'd been given that advice a long time ago, Shami. When I was younger, you set out on your own and you try and do things different. And I would often try and combine genres that had nothing to do with each other. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if it was a this and also a that? But instead of bridging a gap, I always fell between two stools, if I may use two cliches in one sentence. And it's clear, look, oil and water don't mix. You're absolutely right about that. And oil can be fine and water can be fine. But I think if you try and squeeze them together, you're going to end up with, gunk.
Well, I definitely appreciate everybody that's come on here and shared your insights and your thoughts. This has been a fantastic panel. I will say I would love to see a LitRPG tea shop or like bookshop where they're like leveling up their tea or they're mixing. I could see that. I could see a LitRPG like cozy. That might be a lot of fun. I'm not the right person for that one, but I think we got some people who may be motivated. That being said, y'all have been fantastic. I want to give everybody their last chance in the sun to tell us where they can find you, what's coming next. We'll go Richard, Jeff, Shami, then Tao, and then I'll close this up.
You can go to richardsparks.com. Richard Sparks there's no E's in there. It's got you can get free chapters up there from each of the 3 books in the 4-book series. The 4th one comes out later this year. You can get free audiobook chapter or a free literary chapter to read. You can get a blog, which goes for everything. Well, this last week's blog, I do a blog about once every couple of months. Last week's blog was about how to replace your scribe goblin, which has been fun. I've now got a new scribe goblin. I wonder if he's listening. Anyway, so richardsparks.com. And if you like the free samples, come on, jump on in.
Awesome.
Okay. Real quick, because I didn't get to answer the last question.
Okay, absolutely, go for it.
I don't know if it's the next thing, but something that I wanted to do for a long time. I love Wheel of Time, like the world of Wheel of Time. I want a lit RPG that brings people into that world, but I can't write it because I don't have access to it. So I did that with my own world. I wrote a story in the world of Wizardoms, which is established. But maybe that's the next thing is trad publishing realizing that lit RPG can make them money and they can leverage these worlds by having authors write lit RPG in a world that is otherwise just sitting there waiting. Right.
It's a good call out. I like that.
Okay. So anyway, you can find me at jeffreylkohanek.com. I actually put the link in the chat. And otherwise, my books are everywhere. And look for Spellcaster Ted. It's coming out June-ish. Well, I got to find out. I'm trying to sync it up with the audiobook release so it's simultaneous. So we'll see.
Are your fans called Jeffrey Alcoholics Anonymous?
They could be.
Mark, they are now.
Yeah, they could be.
Sorry, Shami.
And I was going to say, Jeff, that is totally like, I love your idea, but it just reminds me of when they started using IPs and making them into video games, and then suddenly they were making tons and tons of money. And I feel like you're right. If they take a lot of their IPs and make them into lit RPGs, I feel like they would print money, but maybe I'm insane. So I think you're onto something. I'm Shami Stovall. Again, Shami like the car cloth. I have a website. You can find my books anywhere that books are found, frankly. I think my latest novel that's going to come out is a lit RPG. It was written by me and my husband, John Stovall. It's called A Superhero Called Doberman. So it's a superhero lit RPG. I'm a huge superhero fan. So I'm really excited for this. And it comes out right before Lit RPG Con. So, it's just all the stars aligning.
Nice.
Yep. I'll see you there if you're there.
Okay, yeah, I
Did you
can't wait.
come?
We should hang out. Legitimately.
Yep.
When is
I'll
that?
be there too.
It's
When
in
is
July.
that?
July
It's
10th,
July 10th to the 12th, I believe, in
Yeah.
Denver.
Denver.
Richard, if you show up, we should also hang out. It would be great.
Absolutely. First I've heard. Nobody tells me anything. Thank you. That's good to hear. Good to hear.
Yep. And I'm Tao Wong. You can find me at mylifemytao.com and under Tao Wong author in most of the various social medias at some point or another. My latest work that has sort of re-released and is Progression Fantasy Cultivation is the first step, which is in bookstores everywhere right now. And that's the one that I'm hawking everywhere. Otherwise, my next lit RPG is coming out at the end of this year called Dungeon Brawler.
Awesome.
Nice.
And again, I'm David Trotter. Thank you all so much for coming on. My next piece is going to be the continuation of my Legend of Neverwhere series, which is a LitRPG Zelda-inspired world. Should have it coming out here in just a couple months. Thank you all again so much. It has been a blast. Please drop your websites in the chat. It has been great. Thank you so much.